Salam and welcome back to SomaliDispatch.com and to our weekly program, Dispatches. I'm Abdul Qadir Goulet. This week on Dispatches, Somalia's upper and lower house elected a joint presidential election committee and said that the election will be held on May 15. Also, Shabaab launched a major attack this week on an ATMIS base in Baraf, killing numerous soldiers in the attack. And finally, this week, the World Press Day, and we will be discussing the state of Somalia's journalism. To discuss those issues, we are joined by Bilan Ahmed and Dr. Nuur Hassan. Dr. Nuur Hassan is an academic based in London and is the African political analyst. And Bilan is a graduate student at the University of St. Thomas in the United States and is an astute political analyst. I started our conversation by asking Bilan to give us her assessment on Somalia's latest election process.
From this week, what I saw was a lot of people who are running, whether it's Hassan Sheikh or Dani or Madaxweyne Farmaajo, who actually sent out his official campaign slogan this week. They're very active on Twitter. And for my analysis, it looks like from other social media like Twitter, TikTok, Twitter, people were sharing a lot of videos, especially the youth are pro Farmaajo, the current president of Somalia. So they're making videos and dance videos and things like that. So they're more, I would say, creative versus like Deni and Hassan Sheikh, who are more, I would say, trying to use the old-fashioned campaign slogans that are not really gaining much traction amongst the young and the youth in Somalia. So that's what I noticed from people sharing things with me.
Right. Dr. Noor, same question before I move on to the next question I have for you, which is when you look at the process side of things, how things went down in electing a speaker and then having the commission that would actually oversee the presidential election. Those were quite the milestones this last week. What were your take on those?
Thank you very much, Brother Qadir. I think the speed in which the process of the speaker's election, the deputies, the MPs swearing, the oath, all really took by surprise. I mean, it was just something that most of analysts were surprised by. In which I mean is that it was a quicker than we expected. It was smoother than we expected. So the process happened in a very obviously there was a hiccups here and there when in fact MPs who were the two versions of MPs who were elected coming from Gedo had a bit of a scuffles and altercations in the House. But in general, I think everything went according to the schedule. And I think it's something that we should really be grateful. My fear was, and I remember last time we had a discussion, my fear was Somalia was heading to into some kind of a unknown territory when it comes to the elections. But luckily, everything went fine. We have now speakers put in place. We have MPs, although there are still unknowns when it comes to the issue of Gedo and Jubaland. But I think overall it went very well. And I think we will come to the question where what is next now? And we know the biggest prize is actually what's going to happen on the 15th. So yeah, overall, I agree with Bilan. Social media is of course, there's a lot of social media campaign going on behalf of Farmaajo and his campaign. But in reality, what matters actually is what happens on the day in the House, because it's the MPs who's going to elect, not the young people on Twitter or on TikToks.
Right. To go back to Bilan for a second, and to have your, if we could get your take on the election of the presidential, the committee that would oversee the election of the president. Both of them, or at least the chairman coming from the opposition. What does that mean for the incumbent president and those that are actually supporting the current government?
I think people misunderstand Farmacho. I think he's very politically savvy. He's brought, things and ideas that were very new to Somalia's political atmosphere. Prior to him coming, there was all, the whole Qabil thing, and he's shown the youth and others who support him, not only the youth, but like our parents, people you see online that are older than us who support him. They indicate that he's showing statesmanship, which he's not, very, like, he doesn't do personal attacks on people compared to the opposition who are constantly attacking his personal, his personal persona, his family, things that are like very disrespectful in the general, space that we deal with. But I think the new committee will have to set up their, voting schedule, and there's no, I feel like Farmacho is very confident in himself. He's not a person that shows dissatisfaction in public, whether he's winning or losing. He, always takes a middle ground. He's okay with that. So I don't think it's going to be a problem for his team. However, we will see what the opposition say. They're the ones always making the big noises. So it will be interesting to see what they say.
Right. Dr. Noor, the biggest noise, as Bilan has put it, has been this week the fact that, the president's campaign launch kind of had a new slogan, which kind of is painting him as a change agent. For an incumbent to make such a claim, what does that tell political analysts such as yourself?
Very surprising, actually. When I read the statement, it was quite surprising. I don't know who wrote it. Farmacho didn't claim his name was on there. He didn't say that he authorized it, but it was a kind of a very naive statement, to be honest with you. It was just quite a contradicting one. You have an incumbent who has been in Villa Somalia for 5 years. He's been accused of all sorts of things. And for him just to come up with, to say he's an agent of change is quite strange. Again, I mean, he's every right to put his campaign slogans, but I thought people who were behind that probably could have done a better job, in my view. Just to go back again, what Bilan says on Farmajo's, confident. Farmajo, if you look at his way of thinking and his political demeanor, it's true. He's always calm. He wants to do things quietly behind the scenes. Although in the beginning, when he was campaigning for the presidency 5 years ago, he wasn't like that. He was very noisy. He was accusing. He was calling names. He was warning everyone. He's quiet because he is the current president, and he knows the opposition he's going to face. He knows that there's a huge amount of dissatisfaction among the political elite. His handling of various serious situations, serious cases while he was in office, were not to the best test. To many Somalis. So I mean, and he also is up against the curse that has been going on, which is about the incumbent has never been reelected. There was no one has been reelected since this process of federalism. The federalism process has started in Somalia. So he's up against that. But again, it's very difficult to predict, because politics does not depend on merits, as I said before. It's all about who has the deepest pocket, who can win on the day, and the MPs change.
Bilan, one of the things that Farmajo's presidency will be judged on, at least in the campaign period for sure, would be the security situation of the country. This week we saw the Al-Shabaab group attacking the African Union forces based in Baraf in southern Somalia, killing scores of Burundian soldiers, where the Americans and the UN and all the bodies, international bodies, condemning that attack. What does that attack and that incident mean for the country's reestablishing its security and stabilizing the country?
Before I answer that question, I think I want to go back to the whole issue with Farmacho's slogan is Sada. I think when people translate that into English, it means the progressive change that's happening in Somalia, which a lot of people, I don't know if you saw the polls on Facebook, but there were several people who were taking polls from the public, and it showed that 91% of the public supports the current government and hope to have them back, versus the incumbents who all got at least 4% to 2%, and some of them got 0%. So yes, there are MPs that are choosing who the president will be, and that the population's desire for political democratic representation is not on the table at this moment, which we hope will be in the next coming elections. However, if you want to talk about democracy, you have to be, these people, these MPs that you're talking about do come from regions that represent the people that are on these Facebooks and TikToks, and they do have connections and contacts with their constituents. When Farmacho was coming up, when this current president was coming in campaigning during his first term, there was a lot of money involved. There was a lot of governments that were interfering in Somalia's elections, as they are today. However, those MPs took the money and they voted for Farmacho. So to say that the Somali MPs are going to just take the money and vote for whoever gives them the money, I think it's politically not a good analysis, because history has shown that can be very much untrue. As far as the Al-Shabaab situation that happened and the Amazon troops that were killed, unfortunately, we are very unhappy about that as Somali people. However, this shows that, the idea that the government was bringing forth to the UN Security Council, stating that Somalia's the embargo on us, the arms embargo that is on us, has to be lifted, because there is no way a government can fight a terrorist organization when its army is, doesn't have the necessary equipment to fight this terrorist organization. I think Somalia has done a really great job the past 4 years building a very uniformed army, and the government has put a lot of investments in building our government to world-class standards. However, the army does need equipment to fight the terrorist organization. And the issue with the African Union has always played a defensive mode. They have never played an offensive mode when it comes to Al-Shabaab. So the fact that their own base was attacked indicates that they're still playing the defensive mode again, and they're not very much interested in the offensive mode and offensive fight that's needed to defeat Al-Shabaab. So becoming a sitting duck and allowing a terrorist organization to attack your base is very, it's very embarrassing for any army in the world. But, this has been an ongoing issue for the African Union in Somalia. So they need to really, work with the Somali army and work on the offensive modes.
Right. Dr. Noor, what does the rise of Al-Shabaab mean for Somalia's political transition in terms of the upcoming presidential election and beyond?
I think Al-Shabaab has been rising. Al-Shabaab is a shadow government. Al-Shabaab runs the state. And I think it's a total failure for Farmacho's government. Of course, Farmacho's government is we know what the National Army, the Somali National Army is. I don't think I would agree with an analysis of accusing AMISOM being defensive rather than offensive. They're there to safeguard the country. We have a government who is in power for 5 years now. The duty of defending the country, it actually is in the hands of the country. This is what Farmajo campaigned in the beginning, when 5 years ago, when he was campaigning for the presidency. He said he will build the army. Yes, there was some progress on building the army. There was a lot of trained army, army by the Turkey. And if you look at on paper, the national army looks beautiful, but they have not defended or done anything at all. So it's not, for me, it's not the rise of Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab has been doing the job. In fact, Al-Shabaab, they have been accused, Farmajo, not necessarily personally, but his government was accused of actually collaborating, working with Al-Shabaab. I have no evidence on doing that, but this is an accusation which is on the record. So Al-Shabaab has been very active. They're very powerful. Of course, it's shocking to see them to daringly attack forces and do such a damage. But I think it's a failure for the current government rather than African Union. Al-Shabaab, if you look at Al-Shabaab, it's not a political organization. Al-Shabaab they are not terrorists in a sense that what they're doing is it's a political issue. What we have is Al-Shabaab's case. It's not, we can't simply dismiss them as a political organization. The terrorist organization. I think Al-Shabaab is there. They're very powerful. They have strong support among people, and what we need to do is really to have a paradigm shift in terms of dealing with Al-Shabaab. Of course, there are some candidates who argue this is a time for any upcoming government to negotiate with Al-Shabaab, like what the Americans did with Taliban in Afghanistan. So, but I mean, Al-Shabaab, and it's only for the government, the current government. Actually, Al-Shabaab has been always active, will always be active. Anyone, despite regardless of whoever comes to power. So it's not a rise. It's not rise. It's not. It's just the shocking attack that we've just seen is what makes it, or magnifies the situation. But it's not a rise. It's actually Al-Shabaab is the real power, the shadow government, whether we like it or not.
Right. Appreciate that. And given the short time that we have, I'll go to my last questions. Bilan, lastly, this week, the world celebrated the World Press Day. Somali journalists has long been in danger and been working in dangerous situations, including murder. What are your thoughts on ways to possibly improve their situations?
Well, before I go to that question, I would want to respectfully disagree with Dr. Noor stating that Al-Shabaab is a shadow government or is powerful. Matter of fact, Al-Shabaab has been losing a lot of ground in the past 4 years. The Somali National Army and NISA, which the current government has rebuilt and is now the top 10 intelligence agency that is also helping a lot of our neighboring countries and giving them intelligence information about Al-Shabaab movements and their potential attacks, has actually their power has actually decreased, and they've lost a lot of ground and a lot of regions, and especially in the Juba area. So I think falsifying information and spreading propaganda is not an analyst. I think you need to look at the true nature on the ground. Like I said, attacking an army base indicates to everyone who have studied basic war of engagements that, it's a very embarrassing situation, and that shows that this army is not, they're not doing an offensive job, they're playing a defensive job. And so, like I said, the Somali army, the war, the arms embargo has to be lifted so that the army can officially take out this terrorist organization. And they're not a government because they don't have a structured governance. They have no representation. They have one guy who's on top who gets killed by the Americans, and then they vote onto it with another guy. That's not an art. That's not a government. So they can never be a government. And on top of that, the Somali people do not support Al-Shabaab because the majority of the victims of Al-Shabaab is the Somali civilians. So for you to say that the Somali people support Al-Shabaab is very, very disrespectful. A lot of people have lost.
I would disagree. I don't think
their
that
children in this.
Bilan, I have to stop you there because I don't really believe that.
As far
Dr.
as
Nuur
the journalists, yeah. So the World Press Day is very important. I think as a nation, as we rebuild our nation, we do need a diversity of ideas and thoughts when it comes to journalism. However, with any profession, journalism has ethics that a journalist needs to uphold, and to gain their respect and in the population. If people see you as one-sided, or if they see you spreading falsehood, obviously people will, lose trust in you. So a lot of the times what the problem is in Somalia when it comes to journalism is we have a lot of people who are funded by foreign entities or NGOs. And so they have to adhere to those people's agendas. So they're not really independent journalists. They're really much dependent on who's paying their salaries. However, we do have independent journalists in Somalia who, get their funding from, advertisement or other business revenues, and so they feel more open to sharing their actual opinions. So I think it all depends on, what route you choose to take as a journalist. Do you want to take the route where you are an independent journalist, where you report on the facts on the ground, or do you want to take the route of, getting your money from, organizations and entities that have a specific agenda when it comes to the Horn of Africa? I mean, you have to understand that we live in a very unique and important region in the world, and every country wants a part of Somalia and the Horn of Africa. And so when these organizations are being funded, they're going to have to adhere to the agendas of those who are funding them. However, as a people, we are Muslims at the end of the day. And, in our religion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to be a people of truth, a people of righteousness. And so, journalism could go either way. You can use it for good or you can use it for bad. And we've seen how, throughout the world, how that has happened, whether it's the war on Iraq, when we were told that the Iraqi government had nuclear weapons, and then we found out after the Iraqi civilization was bombed to the Stone Ages, we found out that they didn't have nuclear weapons or bioweapons. Same thing with Libya, and same thing with Syria. All these countries that were destroyed. If you look back at all the journalism that was going on and all the information we were getting, it turned out to be falsehood afterwards. So I think, as the people of the Islamic faith, we need to understand that, words have meaning, press has meaning, and that we have to stand for truth, and we have to stand for righteousness and dignity, and we have to uphold the dignity of our people. Our people have suffered for over 30 years. I left Somalia when I was 5 years old. I grew up here in the United States of America, and I can see the importance of a press freedom. We have independent press freedom here. We also have corporate media like the CNNs and all that. So people have a wider understanding of what's going on in the world, right? When I went to Somalia in 2019 for the first time in my life, I saw that, our people are suffering. They don't have the basic things that we take for granted here in the United States, for example, for, the things that I take for granted. And, when I came back, I wanted to do good for them. I wanted to make sure that people know how beautiful Somalia is, how generous the Somali people are, how welcoming they are. And so as journalists, I think we need to bring out those positive stories that I saw in Somalia. We don't get to see those stories because there's an agenda always behind, we oh, so-and-so died, but there's all these other amazing things that are going on. I met young people who are, entrepreneurs who are making a lot of money, more money than people here in the United States. And we don't get to hear those stories of how they build their businesses, how they build their entrepreneurial skills. And so I think we need to have more positive and diverse opinions when it comes to journalism. And a lot of the journalists that were attacked by Al-Shabaab who passed away, I mean, we need to, create space to talk about that as well, because, when you're working in a country that is developing, that is also fighting a terrorist organization, there is risk. So you need to understand that if you go into this profession and you're, reporting from the ground, that you could potentially be a victim of terrorism.
Thank you for that take. Dr. Noor, before I give you a chance to give us your thoughts on the good and bad and the ugly on Somali journalism and what needs to be done for improvement, feel free to have your say on Bilan's take on your analysis on how Somali politics and the Al-Shabaab specifically situation.
It's thank you. It's absolutely fine. I mean, obviously, Bilan and I disagree on that point. On the issue of Somalia, obviously, that Al-Shabaab is not. I didn't say Al-Shabaab had the support of Somalis or supported Somalia. Al-Shabaab, what I said was actually something that is on the record. Al-Shabaab, in fact, collects the taxes from people. And Al-Shabaab, you remember that when Al-Shabaab decided to shut the biggest market in Mogadishu for about 2 weeks or so, the government couldn't do anything at all. So they are their shadow government. They are the ones who runs, whether we like it or not. This is the truth. Whether they are supported by people or whether they are terrorists or non-terrorists, it's a different matter. But we have a different opinion on that case. So if I go back again to the question, what are you asking me, or shall I just go ahead with the question of journalism?
Go right ahead.
I mean, yeah, I largely agree with Bilan in her assessment, on journalism. And I think that Somalia is a quite unfriendly place for anyone who wants to practice this profession. I think whether you are independent or dependent or as Bilan said, funded by foreign elements, there's no such a free press in Somalia. In fact, even open societies, democratic societies, have had problems in their press department because there's so much fake news going on. There's a social media around. Anyone can put anything. So while we have a vibrant, very strong individual, Somalis are very, very good at telling stories, that we're all storytellers. We like news, but unfortunately, the good news that Bilan was referring to, no one is reporting on that those news, because bad news sells quite a lot. And if you look even in developed countries, they always sell bad news. Bad news sells more than good news. It's quite unfortunate. But I don't know who is being funded by who. Everybody has their own opinion on that one. But there is no such a thing as an independent, free press in Somalia. It cannot be, because Somalia is in that part of the world where there is no such a freedom. And anyone who dares say the truth will get the consequences. I mean, the consequences could be life and death. So while we want to have a vibrant, independent, free press in Somalia, I think we have a long way to go. And also traditional news reporting has now changed. It really completely changed. You have now individuals. I can set up my own news reporting agencies if I want to. I don't have to be a journalist. I don't have to be an independent. I can push my opinions. I can push my fake news if I want to. And people can do this, all sorts of things. So there's a lot of things going on as far as this field is concerned. But generally, Somalia is classified. I haven't looked at the list of the most the most unfriendly
That would
places
be
for
Somalia.
journalists.
It's been designated.
Yeah, I think Somalia is number one, maybe number two. So everybody can see it. And why? Not because people hate reporting. It's because of there's no safety, there's no governance. The governance. There's everyone wants to push, especially this time of the year. I think it's a very, very dangerous for any
but Dr. Nuur, I think you need to look at the numbers. Past 4 years, actually, journalists in Somalia have had more freedoms to report from the ground, and there has actually been less death of journalists in the past 4 to 5 years. As far as no press freedoms in Somalia, I don't think you need. It's kind of ironic how people always try to compare Somalia to developed world. The developed world. Somalia is emerging from a 30-year war. So it's not a fair metric. And if you've learned anything about science and metrics and, measuring, things, comparing and contrasting things, you have to compare and contrast based off of, the reality on the ground. I mean, Somalia is a developing country. It's emerging from a civil war. So for you to say that, there's, compared to so-and-so, or we're the lowest when it comes to this metric. Well, of course, we're going to be the lowest when it comes to that metric because we're, rebuilding our statehood. Without a statehood, you can't have press freedoms, like you said.
Right, Bilan. If with all respect, your point well taken. Dr. Nuur, finish your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's I wasn't comparing Somalia against Britain or the US. I was just giving a general statement on how poor how unfriendly Somalia is for anyone who wants to operate in that profession. That was the point I was trying to make. But yes, Bilan is right. We're recovering from a state collapse. We are emerging from civil war, problems of governance, and to expect any free press in that kind of environment is to expect the sky to be lower than the earth. So I'm not saying that, but the point I was trying to make is you cannot deny the statistics. Statistics is Somalia is the worst place to be a journalist. Whether that is something to do with where we are in terms of politics or security, or whether to do anything else, it's a fact. It's something that it's there. We have obviously Kenya and Ethiopia next door. They are worse. I mean, Kenya is much better than Somalia. Obviously, it's a slightly situation is different, but Ethiopia is also as bad as Somalia. So it's not really something that is uniquely common to the Somali peninsula, but it's a regional. It's something to do with the Horn of Africa, the way we set up politically. So my conclusion would be where it can be, we can have a vibrant, free press, but we have a long way to go.
Appreciate you both for joining in and weighing in on these issues. I can't thank you guys enough for joining us today. Bilan is a graduate student at University of St. Thomas in the States. And as you all know, I've seen Dr. Nuur here before. He's a writer and a political analyst and a scholar that lives in the UK. Thank you for both of you for joining us, and I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.